This is the way it happens every year. We get to the end of the cycle, and it just starts to. We have one more class, so that's next Thursday, and that's our last class for the Thursdays. But we'll continue doing the Saturday ones. So, what's that?
I threw my head in my schedule.
Let's stand and pray. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, amen. Christ is risen from the dead, trampling down death by death, and upon those in the tombs bestowing life. Christ is risen from the dead, trampling down death by death, and upon those in the tombs bestowing life. Christ is risen from the dead, trampling down death by death, and upon those in the tombs bestowing life. Christ is risen. Indeed, he is risen. So, as I was saying, next Thursday will be our last of our Thursday classes, though we are starting the cycle kind of new on Saturdays at 3 for people, because we have a lot of new people who can't come on Thursdays. And we'll be covering the Divine Liturgy over the next 2 Saturdays. So, as you remember, we were talking about the 5 ships of the church. Apostleship, fellowship, worship, stewardship, and discipleship. And so we've actually covered worship. We've covered the other 3. So today we're going to cover the last of those, fellowship, or as I call it, how to be a parishioner. Right? So what does it mean to be a parishioner in a parish? Because there are a lot of people who've never had that experience. Right? They've never actually been in a community. We were just talking about that. So how do you live in a community, or as the word better describes in Greek, koinonia, which means more than just fellowship. It means a communion of people that gather together. So how we live in the parish and how we are as parishioners is incredibly important, because, as I've said many times, you can't be a Christian by yourself. You have to be in a community, by the very nature of what it means to be in a church, an ecclesia, a gathering together, a coming together. And when you know this, like, you do something on your own and you think you've got it, and you'll usually go astray. And so this idea of being together, being accountable to one another, to be accountable to God, to be led, to be together in a fellowship, in a communion, literally, when you're a member of the church, right? You're in communion with the church. You receive communion. So it's an important part. And I thought it would be interesting, before we get into some of that, I have a couple of things I wanted to just kind of, I want to give a little bit of background, because a lot of people don't know about the history of the Orthodox Church in America, how we came to be here, and how things kind of got formed. Even this particular parish is part of a paradigm that happened. But before we get into that, I want to just give you a few quotes. Now, I think one of the best books to read on this is Father Thomas Hopko, who was the priest here and then became the dean of the seminary, because In Spirit and Truth is his book. And there's wonderful articles in there. As a matter of fact, it's a required reading for my seminarians. They have to answer certain questions. But I want to start with you from a quote that was in my doctoral dissertation from one of the people that I was amongst the 200 and some odd people I was interviewing and examining. And I want you to listen to this quote, because it's a very astute parishioner reflecting on what it means to be in a parish. Any parish that starts the holy experiment, as Father has taught, the church, everything is synergistic with the Godhead, the Holy Spirit. If you truly have a group of people who are Christian and they love God, and I think it's a mutual thing, they love the priest loves them, but the priest also loves God and is able to articulate the doctrines and the teachings of the church. If you're going to have fertile ground where the holy experiment will blossom, and that's what happened here, he's talking about this particular parish, and I think it's relevant to any group, any ethnic group, any age group, any people group within the United States. It's got to plant the seeds in the ground where it's going to grow. So, it's good to see you. You doing okay?
Yeah.
Okay. God doesn't place a parish in a particular location frivolously or accidentally, right? Because God can't do that. he said that he does it intentionally. How this parish formed here in Wappinger Falls 60 years ago was an intentional planting of this parish. And the history is kind of interesting, but we're not going to get into that in a second. And so when we look at why God intentionally plants a parish, we also have to look how we intentionally form a parish. Right? We're all intentionally here. I hope so. No one's kidnapping you or forcing you to be here. But we're all intentionally formed this fellowship. We formed this communion because we want to be part of it. And so it's not by an accident. I love the quote that the Apostle Paul says. He says, I planted, Apollo seeded, but God gave the growth. You know, the first priest, the first community, our founders of this parish planted. And all the clergy and the people, all through these 60 years, seeded this parish. But it was God who gave the growth. It was God who intentionally planted here. So just to go back a little bit, a slight bit. So, as you know, the Orthodox Church in America came from the Russian Orthodox Church. In 1793, Alaska was part of the Russian Empire. And so there were missionaries, 9 missionaries, who were sent from Russia to come to Alaska to serve the people in Alaska, the Russian people. Of those, only one ended up remaining. Either died or went back or were killed. And that was St. Herman. Right there, you see his icon right there. St. Herman of Alaska. So he was just a monk. He wasn't a priest. He was just a simple monk. But who loved the people and intentionally knew that he was not there just to serve the Russian traders, but to serve the natives and everyone that God put in. And the church spread with all those missionaries into Alaska, throughout Alaska, and became really the bedrock. They were able to translate everything into the native language. In fact, the native languages wouldn't exist to this day if it wasn't for the people like St. Innocent or St. Herman or others who really intentionally worked to make sure that they could hear the services in their own language. And St. Innocent, who came later, he was the first bishop here in Alaska, wrote an incredible document in the instructions to missionaries, which I use today in all my classes, and what he talks about and how he talks to reach people and to take care of them. And these missionaries became the protectors of the Alaskan people. And I think that's something we as Orthodox in America should be very proud of, that we didn't go out and massacre the native people, but rather we went and we protected them. St. Herman was exiled from Kodiak because he refused to bend to the will of the governor, and actually lived on Spruce Island, was exiled to Spruce Island, where he cared for people during the famine and during the plague and all other sorts of miracles. So much so that they loved him so much, even years after he was dead, they still venerated him. But he set for us this course of what it meant to be Orthodox in Alaska, Orthodox in America. That we were going to be here for the people here. So that first phase with St. Innocent and other missionaries who came, and the church started to spread. St. Innocent ended up going down to California. Fort Ross, outside of San Francisco, was a Russian settlement where the very small Russian churches still exist today. On July 4th every year we have services in the church. And eventually that West Coast, we had little Orthodox communities as people started to come down and trading. And really, we're the only Christian church that came from the West Coast into America rather than from the East. But over time, as immigration happened to America, we had various groups escaping from persecution, various Orthodox communities who came here and started settling. And so you had the West Coast and the East Coast kind of filled with different communities. So you had Russian communities, Greek communities, Arabic, Serbian, whatever they may be, each forming their own parish. And all of those communities are under St. Tikhon. He is, where's his name? No, he has his icon. Somewhere here. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm looking right at it. St. Tikhon right there. Jeez. So St. Tikhon was, well, St. Raphael was the first. He formed around him this incredible group of missionaries and bishops. A lot of them are canonized now. Each one kind of dealing with their own communities. So, St. Raphael dealt with the Arabic community. St. Sebastian with other communities. We had Justin Popovich with the Serbian. They all worked together. And many parishes were established as they started to kind of work inland, and the immigrant communities started to establish such communities because we were weird. We're weird Orthodox. Our churches don't look like other churches. We have different calendar, for Easter. We use these strange languages that no one quite understands. And so it was really about trying to survive in this country as immigrants into a community. So many times they formed these sort of ethnic ghettos. My family, when they came over after the revolution, they went, there was a group of people who settled in Clifton, New Jersey. And that's where they all were. And they all took care of each other, in a way. They all figured out a way to take care of each other. I'll get to that in a second. But the Russian Revolution really messed things up, right? Because then we couldn't have contact with our parishes back, with our bishops back in Russia, nor could anyone else. And so St. Tikhon, who was brought back to Russia, became the patriarch, and then was eventually murdered by the communists. As were many of our first of those people. Basically told people, find a bishop and get under him, and hopefully this will pass. Well, it didn't. And so that really confused things. So now why we have in Wappinger Falls, we have 2 Greek churches, we have an Arabic church, we have a ROCOR church, we have all these different jurisdictions because of the revolution. It just complicated things. And so we had to figure out a way to survive. We kept our connection with the Russian church, but it was very kind of quiet, shall we say. We would go to meetings of for the World Council churches, and we would pass notes to each other. And, we would get our chrism brought in from Russia, how should we say it, secretly, because the U.S. government first off wasn't allowing us, and the communist government wasn't allowing us. In fact, the communist government were sending groups over here to take control of our properties, and there were major legal fights all the way up to the Supreme Court of the United States, by the way, so that we could keep our properties. And so, but what happened is, in the midst of all of this, God sent us great luminaries who really helped. Metropolitan Leonti, one of the most amazing and he's up for canonization, amazing sort of visionary about what it means to be Orthodox in this country. And so we survived, and we implemented, in 1917, there was a council, the All-Russian Council at St. Tikhon, and it was about how to organize the church in the modern world. And there were many allowing the lay people to have a certain say in what we do, allowing women to participate, for example, in debates. Instead of using Old Church Slavonic, to try to move to Russian, so people could understand. And sadly, it never got implemented because of the revolution, some of these things. But Metropolitan Leonti was there, and he brought back many of these principles, which formed the basis of the OCA, the Orthodox Church in America. So in the meantime, we had groups of people like St. Alexis of Wilkes-Barre, who was an Eastern Rite Catholic priest, a widowed priest who came here, and he was kicked out of the Catholic bishop's office, Bishop John Ireland, and he brought 40,000 of the former Eastern Rite Catholics into the Orthodox Church. Many, they call them Toft parishes. My family's kind of a part of that Toth parish movement, that they brought him back into the fold of Orthodoxy. And so, anyway, so as we got more and more established and the church became more and more kind of American in a way, we really felt that it was time for us to really not have that connection with the Russian church, but rather be our own church. And so in 1970, through some negotiations, and there's one person left alive from those original negotiations, they granted us autocephaly, which means self-governance. We elect our own bishops, we make our own chrism, we follow the rules of the church. And they changed the name. The original name, we were the, get this, Russian Orthodox Greek Catholic Metropolia, right? And we changed the name to the Orthodox Church in America. That was actually St. Innocent. He said, and this was in the early 19th century, he said he saw a day when we would have an Orthodox Church in America. And he specifically took that term from the way in which the Apostle Paul, because he always said he didn't talk about the Corinthian Orthodox Church. He said the Orthodox Church, the church in Corinth, the church in Ephesia, to the church in, and so it's not the idea that we're an ethnic group, but rather this is the church in this locality. Okay? And so after the formation, and I was just a kid, and I remember us doing that, and we changed to the new calendar, and we did some other things, and it was exciting. We elected our first American-born Metropolitan Theodosius, who ordained me to the priesthood, and we changed everything to English, though you had different places that still did Russian or Romanian, because we had the Romanian church came with us, the Bulgarians, the Albanians. We had a whole group of Mexican churches come into the Orthodox Church. We had the Canadian church. So right now there are about 15 languages on an average Sunday that are the services being done throughout North America, including 5 native languages, native Alaskan languages. So you got French up in Canada, you got Spanish, you got all sorts of different groups. So many of these parishes, again, had been established in these kind of urban ethnic areas. Some out in the farmlands where people had settled and farmed and stuff. Mining towns. A lot of our people worked in the steel mills and the mining towns in Pennsylvania. And eventually, after World War II, we had, which was very common, the flight to the suburbs. So, people started moving out of those areas. They followed the jobs. And so you started to see parishes being established throughout the suburbs. This is one of those parishes. So this was the parish. Most of the founders of this parish either came from Eastern Pennsylvania or from Brooklyn. And why? Because IBM. IBM, this is where the jobs were. They moved to where the jobs were. And when they came here, and we still have some of our founding people here with us today, Serge being one of them. It started in his house. Literally, this church started in Serge's. He always sits here. It literally started in his house. I was with him all day today. And, Eleanor from the choir, her husband Basil was the choir director for like 30 years here. I mean, so they wanted this parish to be part of the Orthodox Church in America. Father Schmemann was very instrumental. Father Hopko was brought in, who was Father Schmemann's son-in-law, to help establish this so that this would be kind of the English-speaking parish in this area. And that's the vision that they had, that we were going to be a parish for anybody who wanted to find orthodoxy, whether you were born into it or whether you came into it intentionally, that this was going to be the place. And so this bright kind of history, and my parish in Wayne, New Jersey was one of those where I grew up. We moved from our parish in Clifton, my great-grandfather built, and my grandfather was the treasurer there for like 40 years. They literally built that. They would work in the mills, the sweater mills and stuff. They would get off of work, they come and they built the church by hand. They dug and here they dug the foundations and they did everything. This was a catalog. They ordered this from a catalog and they dropped all the stuff off here. Yeah, I mean, it's been added on and all that stuff, but it was a catalog. Sure. What? No, it wasn't. There was actually, at that time, there was a very specific company that did this, and they had dug the foundation and they dropped 4 guys off with all the supplies, and these 4 guys built this church, and they lived in the building while they were building it. It's kind of amazing. Anyway, so one of the issues that we had, though, was that many of our Orthodox communities kind of retreated in on themselves, right? It was a strange world, we don't know, So we kind of lost some of the missionary spirit that we were established with, and rather became in certain ways chaplains to the culture. So you had the Greek churches who still have Greek class and do all the, Greek culture things and things. And, not that there's anything wrong with that, but I think we lost our missionary spirit about what it meant to be Orthodox in America. And really, when I was just starting out as a priest, we saw that all start to come back. We had all these groups of converts coming in, whole parishes converting to the OCA, literally. Whole parishes that were either Episcopalian or Protestant and became Orthodox. And we were starting to send out missionaries. That's why I was one of those ones who was sent to Montana, right, in order to start a parish there because people had gathered and the area was right. Even though there was an old Serbian church that was consecrated by St. Tikhon in Butte. But that's a whole other story. It's a hilarious story. Anyway, so as we started to do that, we saw other parishes starting to pop. And now, rather than being a bunch of Russians or Russian background, our metropolitan is a convert to the church. Most of the bishops are converts to the church. Most of my seminarians are converts to the church. So we see this sort of revitalization of new blood and new ideas and really kind of bringing a certain sense of dynamism. That's a quick and easy sort of explanation of the OCA. So we were formed in 1970, and here we are 50 years later, 54 years later. And we've had our ups and our downs, and we've had our problems, and they are our problems, but we have a vision that I think is incredibly important. And so, and I believe, as you could probably tell, I'm very tied into that because it was very formational as a kid for me. When Metropolitan Theodosius, before it was Metropolitan Irenae, he was this grumpy old Russian guy that you couldn't look at. If I looked at him, my grandmother would smack me on the side of the head. Like, you don't look at the Metropolitan, right? You look down, sort of thing. Then we had Metropolitan Theodosius, young guy who was playing softball with us, at church camp. And he ordained me to the priesthood. Archbishop Peter gave me to diaconate. And it was kind of an amazing time, kind of an amazing time. I think of all the youth that I grew up with in the church and how many ended up becoming priests because of the influence of that. So anyway, so that's it. We just went through a whole long 20-minute explanation of the OCA, but now you know. So just to be totally honest, so we are, as the Orthodox Church in America, we are one of the 14 Orthodox churches in the world, right? But not all of them recognize our autocephaly, right? They recognize our canonicity. We're all valid. Like, I can go to a Greek church, like when I do Rebecca's wedding, we have Greek priests coming here. But for example, the Greek churches in this country are under the Patriarch of Constantinople. If they recognize our autocephaly, that means they all have to go under us. And so they won't do that. They don't care, but they say, oh, you're part of the Russian church. No, we're not. But, and we get to these meetings and they say, what is the Russian church? Because I don't know what the Russian church means. I can tell you what the OCA wants. So about a third of the jurisdictions don't recognize our autocephaly. About a third do, and a third couldn't care less. So, and mostly it's the Greek world. Again, we are in communion with each other. We're totally, but this political part of it is an issue, and stay away from it. Politics are the worst. Church politics are even more horrible. So anyway, so that's who we are. So I want to give you a couple of quotes from that book I said. And he's talking about these parishes in America, Father Hopko. And these parishes, certainly in the United States and Canada, will be of a great variety of sizes, shapes, and styles. And through each one, theologically and mystically, will be very much the same Church of Christ. The parish will be composed of different kinds of people. They'll be of different cultures and traditions. They'll have different emphasis and possibilities in worship, education, pastoral care, philanthropic and evangelical activity. None of them will claim they can do everything by themselves. All of them admit that they need each other. And being constrained by truth and love to cooperate for God's glory and the good of God's people. They will all confess that to do God's work, they cannot compete with one another, but must complete each other in Christian service and ministry. They will know that the only way in which they will strive to outdo each other is in expressing godly zeal, brotherly affection, honor, and mutual respect. And you go. So, Father Tom actually has, I won't go into this too much, but he has a very provocative comment. He said, this situation that we have here in North America has never existed in the Orthodox world for 2,000 years. And that's one of the questions my seminarians have to answer. What is he talking about? An Orthodox church is usually a geographical bound, right? So you have the Russian Orthodox Church. It's the church in Russia. Or you have the Serbian Orthodox, the church in Serbia, right? Or Romania, or whatever. In America, we have such a multiple jurisdiction issue because of the Russian Revolution. So we have the bishops for the Greeks down the road, and the Rokor bishop here, and it's kind of like confusing. So we are the only Orthodox church in history that is, one, not controlled by a foreign patriarchate or controlled by a government, that we are a minority church, and we have to come up with our funding by ourselves. So we're it. So a lot of other churches like Albania, Czechoslovakia, Poland, they look to us to say, like, how do you do it? Because they're minority churches in their areas. And so, again, we have to figure out what it means to be Orthodox in this country and to coexist with all the other Orthodox churches, not in competition, but in cooperation. So, and I think on the whole, depending where you are, we do it fairly well. Some places it's a little dicey, and this priest doesn't like that priest or whatever, but that's just normal. I mean, here we all get along. All the other, they have their meetings. Some we're invited. Sometimes I go, sometimes I don't. But we talk to each other. We have a good relationship with each other. I don't think, and if we have a problem, or if they have a parishioner who starts coming here, I always call them saying, "Hey, so and so is coming here to church. Is that okay with you?" "Oh yeah," So we try to be together on this. Okay? Oh, you're yawning. I thought you were going to give me a question. All right. So, now that you understand this whole idea of the church, I want to just take a step backwards, and I want to just give you 7 things that a church should be doing. How do I know these 7 things? It's my doctoral dissertation, so. And my upcoming book that's about to be published. But I want you to think about this, and think about how it is that if this parish is doing those things. It's not a test. Just reflect on it. 1, it has to be rooted in a liturgical life. Right? So we have to have the liturgy. We have to have the services. We have to do the full cycle that we're capable of doing, because everyone works, our choirs volunteer, all that sort of thing. Everything we do in the liturgy is missionary. Everything we do is to reach outward. We bring people in to send people out. And our greatest witness of what we are and who we are as Orthodox is how we do the services, how we celebrate the liturgy, all those sort of things. How many of you got attracted to that because you saw something there that touched your heart, said, wow, this is something that's really amazing. Second thing, it has to be deeply relational. The priest needs to know his people. The people need to know the priest. The people need to be with each other. They have to actually want to be with each other, right? They have to actually want to be part of a community. You have to have that deep relationship with each other, because that relationship must always reflect the community's relationship with God. We're just a reflection of the community of the Trinity, but also the love of God has to radiate through the priest to the people, and from the people through the priest to God. So we have to have that relationship. In other words, I need to know who you are. We always read John 10. The sheep knows the name, and the sheep follow because they know the shepherd. And that's part of the niceness of being in a small parish. When I was in a large parish, I had hundreds and hundreds of people. Some people I just never knew. I never got involved in their lives. You have to have a witness of the parish. What we do has to, in other words, this is how I always put it. Many people read their way now into the Orthodox Church. Not necessarily read now, but YouTube their way into the Orthodox Church. And what they're finding out and studying, and then they walk in and it's not matching, they'll turn around and walk away. Right? We cannot be hypocritical. If this is who we say we are, we need to be this way as a church and as a community. And so how we witness that we actually love each other and are Christian, believe it or not, that we actually act like Christians, is an incredibly important part of being part of a community. We must focus on activities within the parish. In other words, we need to know our people. And if one person suffers, we all suffer. And if one person excels, we all excel. But we need to know, yes, this person's going through this issue. We need to be there for them. This person has this need, or, we have to be able to respond to that like we did when Father Peter and Matushka Sophie lost their baby, right? How we all responded with love towards them. That's an important part, right? That we actually want to be with each other. We have to actually do things in the community. We have to be part of where God puts us. Like I told you, we were intentionally planted here. Right? It wasn't some accident. We were intentionally planted here for whatever reason it is that God wanted us to be here. And as I challenged the parish council, if the ground swallowed this church up and left it totally empty lot here with just grass, how would we be remembered by the people around us? Not the neighbors there, or in Wappinger Falls, or wherever. So now we have an AA group that meets here. Now we try to, the blood drive. We try to do things. We work at the lunchbox, to serve meals for the homeless. We try to do those things to make an important part of our community. I'm the chaplain for the fire department. I'm the chaplain for the Fraternal Order of Police, so that they know that, hey, here we are. So, and we have to visit people. We have to go and do those type of things. Matthew 25. We have to have a healthy relationship with money. Oh my God, I can't tell you how many parishes I've seen where money, and it just drives them apart, drives them down. We have to know that it's, like we talked about last week, about stewardship, everything we have belongs to God. I'll tell you a brief story. So when I ran the national program of evangelism, and I would work with missions as they were starting, and we had one mission that got the dream gift, $1 million given to it. The giver didn't want to know anything about it. He said, just make a church happen here. Here's $1 million. If you need more, let me know. That parish fought over that money, made some very bad mistakes despite a lot of advice against it, and eventually closed down. They were not ready for success. They weren't ready to deal with money. They didn't have the ability to understand this gift. And so it's very important. That's why I was pushing to get that mortgage paid off. Let's have a good relationship. Let's not have that hang over us. Let's use our money for what is good, for the glorification of God. And then finally, we have to have a question on the ethnic situation. You guys don't know that because you haven't experienced it in this parish. We are a multi-ethnic, everyone's from every different background. It's wonderful. We do everything in English. We try to honor everybody's backgrounds. But there are some parishes you walk in as an Orthodox, and if you're not a Russian, they're going to look at you. Right? So this parish intentionally set it up to be a non-ethnic parish. And I think the fruits of it are very powerful, which is why you are all here, right? Because they're not making you pass the ethnic test. And I'm only half, so it doesn't even work for me. So anyway, even though my family's now on the, fifth or sixth generation of being a part of the Metropolia OCA, so, you know. Anyway, people say, well, when did you convert to the church? When I was about 40 days old, you know. Because Tassi, that's Italian name. I must be a convert. Anyway, so keep those 7 things in mind. Now let's talk about you individually. All right, and I just want to frame this. We're moving along here. And then we're going to talk about even more individual. So the church, this community, needs to be theologically and liturgically sound, pastorally applicable, be a communion, be responsible in all areas of church life. So whether we put in a new floor or we have a new icon painted, we need to do it in a good and responsible way. Be responsive to the needs of the parish, be responsive to the needs of the surrounding community, be an incarnation of the gospel. And the parish must be the parishioners. No. I'm going to skip that. So the priest, me, right? I must gather the people. I must lead the people. I must proclaim the gospel. I must serve properly. I must instruct the people, do the sacraments, care for everyone, lighten their burdens. That's something I always kick into my seminarians. You're not there to increase their burdens. You're there to lighten their burdens. Intercede on behalf of his people and advocate on behalf of his people. But the people must assist the priest, care for the clergy, encourage the priest, support the priest, and follow the priest. It's a two-way street, right? If I'm going to sacrifice myself for you guys, the least you could do is kind of support me in what I'm trying to do, right? Doesn't mean you have to agree with everything. I don't want little automatons saying, yes, Father, but I at least understand. Come and question and talk to me and help us understand. We must do so together in conciliarity, understanding each of us have a unique vocation in the church. A priest must be able to be a priest, and a laity must be able to be the laity. Not one over the other, but different. There is a hierarchy, right? We have priests, we have bishops, we have metropolitans. But there's a conciliar understanding. A priest cannot be a priest without the people, and the people cannot be a church without the priest. Right? Just like the metropolitan, I can't do anything without my bishop, because I'm an extension of the bishop. That's why he signs the Antimencia. He inspects the church. The bishop can't do anything without his priests. The metropolitan can't do anything apart from the bishops. The bishops can't do anything apart from the metropolitan. It's all that idea of being a conciliar. That's why, where does the bishop stand when he comes? In the center of the church, not on top. In the center he starts, because we're gathered around our bishop. Like St. Cyprian of Carthage said, where the bishop is, there also is the church. So how do we connect? We seek out each other, we engage each other, we evaluate each other, we form relationships, we are consistent, we discuss, we defend, we love. We are the church. We be the church, right? So I want to talk to you. So these are just little kind of random thoughts about the kind of matrix that we look at ourselves and say, are we actually doing what we're doing? Are we actually being what we're supposed to be as a church? Try to find a quote. too many notes. Oh, here's a quote from St. Keaton, right? And so he went to this church in Wilkinson, Washington. Wilkinson, Washington is on the foot of Mount Rainier. It was a coal mining community. I've been to this parish. It still exists, this tiny church. It ended up moving to Tacoma, but they still maintain that church, and it's actually growing again. And it's hard to get there now. I can't imagine how he got there in the 1890s, right? But as he was leaving, he said, and this is what he told the parish, "Your flock is composed of Arabs, Greeks, and Slavs. For many years they managed without a priest, and they came here in search of a living, their daily bread, perhaps to ponder over the bread of heaven, the one thing needful. And other parts of your flock consist of units who reunite and living in Wilkinson, and they manifest their love for the Orthodox faith with good deeds. See that they do not cool in their first love, but abound in it. Make this community, which is still small, grow like a mustard seed in the gospel into a shady tree, under which all who are still live outside our pasture may find shelter too. The community will draw people most if divine services are performed there reverently and devoutly, the church life is distinguished by its piety, and if the members of this community live in peace, love, and brotherhood." That parish now is one of the largest parishes in the Diocese of the West and has all this beautiful property. And I can tell you, they're one of the parishes I studied in my dissertation. St. Tikhon predicted it, that if they maintained what they were supposed to be as a community, God would bless them, and he did. So, anyway, I've given you, in the past, and if you want, look it up, Hopko's 55 Maxims for Living a Christian Life. It's something that you can look on and how you can grow yourself. But I'm going to finish this up with a discussion what Father Schmemann said. It's in one of the pamphlets back there. And about how we are to be Christian. He said there's 3 ways. He said, I am sent to myself, I am sent to my family, I am sent to the world. And I think this is where you have to really think about it. We all get zealous about the church. We all want to go out there and preach the gospel, and that's good. But first and foremost, you're sent to yourself. Develop and grow in your piety, grow in your love for God, grow in your love for the church. Outdo each other with zealous works of the Lord. And take care of your soul that it's on good, solid ground. And when that's on good, solid ground, my brothers and sisters, then you can move on in your life and start to talk about these things. The next thing he said is and again, each of us is given a gift. Every one of us has a gift to be used in this church. Some of us don't know what it is yet. It's there, and it will be used. And when time comes, use it. We are all called to be prophets, priests, and kings. Prophets, priests, and kings. All of us. Some are sacramental priests. But by virtue of us being members of the church, we are prophets. In other words, we speak the word to the world. We are all priests. In other words, we worship God. And we're all kings glorified with the baptism and chrismation in Christ. Then, and only then, can we be sent to our families. How do we manifest the church in our family? Each home is like a little church. And it should be a place where those members of that family all have one mind, one heart. Doesn't mean you don't disagree. Everyone disagrees. If you don't, I'd be really worried. But it means you understand that you live this life in wonderful community of God. And that how we manifest our life at home, our children will see. Our neighbors will see. Spouses, as St. John, the believing spouse sanctifies the unbelieving spouse. All those sort of ways in which you help each other and uphold each other. So be an example. Be humble. Live the faith, as it's called. Do not badmouth the church or the clergy or to the family. We all try that. Tendency to do that. Priests are the worst. But we try to avoid that. We keep that out of my house. We never talk when my kids were growing up about church stuff like that. Even though I was working for the Metropolitan and all the bishops, and I was like up to here in church politics, we kept it away. They don't need to hear that. Especially clergy families. They're a fishbowl to begin with. And everyone wants to see what they're doing. And then finally, we are sent to the world. We are sent to the world to be a witness, to be a shining light of what a Christian is and what is believed. Live the life. Deal with people lovingly, justly, honestly, patience, kindness, gentleness, and purity. Doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're not an asshole, basically, right? You're actually going to be nice and actually be a Christian to one another and how you present yourself. So this is another quote from St. Tikhon from that same talk. Orthodox people must care for the dissemination of the Orthodox faith among they call the heterodox, the non-Orthodox. Christ, the Savior, said that men lighting a lamp do not put it under a bushel, but on a stand. And it gives light to all the house. The light of Orthodoxy is not lit for a small circle of people, but go into all the world, preach the gospel to all creation, and make disciples of all nations. It is our obligation to share our spiritual treasures, our truth, our light, our joy, with those who do not have these gifts. Our duty lies not only on pastors and missionaries, but on the lay people. For the Church of Christ, in a wise comparison to St. Paul's a body, and in the life of the body, every member must take part. For each of us, the dissemination of the Christian faith must be a favorite task, close to our hearts, precious to us. In this task, each member of the church take an active part, some by personal missionary efforts, some by monetary support and service to the needs of the people, some by prayer to the Lord that he might establish and increase the church, and that he may teach the word of truth who do not know Christ, but might reveal to them the gospel of righteousness, unite them in his holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. That was the last words he said to his flock in America before he went and got martyred. Isn't that amazing to think about that? If we live that life, if we are people who love one another, support one another, live the life in conciliarity, working towards our salvation together, then this is what it means to be a parishioner in a parish. We're not walking the path by ourselves, but we're walking the path because God gave us this path to walk, and we can walk it together. And so with that, this was a very condensed class that usually takes like 3 or 4 hours, but any questions? Did something strike you about what I spoke about? You guys have no... Go, challenge me, Seth, come on.
Right. Because things we've gone over, when I ask you questions about like dealing with other people when you don't know enough yourself and you're still learning,
Mm-hmm.
you know, like I am a sinner, first and sinner, and all that stuff. Like it's hard to tell other people.
Yeah, I think just being a good person, right? Being a person of honor, of being a person that you know, yeah, you may wear a cross around your neck, but you're not a hypocrite about it, right? You're not shy about it, but you're not a hypocrite about it. You know, you can't claim to be a Christian and hanging out at the strip bars, right? You know, that's just not, compatible, right? So I think that's the most powerful witness that we can do in this world, is just being a good Christian. Because I think this, and I really do believe this, and some of you have actually experienced it. You know, people have such a misunderstanding of what a Christian is, right? They see him as a bunch of pious, self-centered, judgmental people, right? Yeah, and that's how they're presented in the popular media, and that's how they're presented in the world, and look at them and, oh, they're also like squeaky clean, sort of thing. And we're normal people who are just trying to live our life and figure out our salvation. So when they meet someone who is a Christian and lives that life and doesn't push it on them, but just lives it, they exude that authenticity. And I think that's what the world needs. It's just authentic Christians. We've twisted the meaning so much that it's unrecognizable. And I've met many of people, in-your-face Christians, and just like trying to tell me, would you really understand Jesus? It's like, yeah, but I don't think you do. Is what you want to say, because you're certainly not acting like a Christian. And so I think the most powerful witness we have is that if we wear that cross, we need to live according to that cross. But remember, the cross, Christ didn't promise us prosperity or easiness or anything. He promised us the cross. But he also said that the cross is light. The yoke is easy. So he gives us everything that we need to live. On the back, not this one. This was actually carved by a native Alaskan, very famous. It's a walrus tusk, and one of my parishioners in Montana was a native Alaskan. Allie, she was an actress actually, and when she said, I have to have an ivory cross. Like, you can't be a priest without an ivory cross. So she had her uncle carve this and send it to me. So every now and then I pull it out, and it has a lot of special meaning to me. But on a normal priest's cross, they have a saying on the back, and it says, "Be an example in all that you do in life, faith, and purity." It comes right from Ephesians, where it talks about what a priest should be. And it's there to remind us. It's not to be a fancy decoration, though I have some fancy crosses. It's there to remind us of what our job is to carry the cross. Right? The people will never know and should never know the tears that the priest cries over them. Right? I'll tell you another brief story. I had a good friend of mine. We were new priests, and we always talk. And we even to this day we talk. We kind of unload on each other. And he was telling me about one particularly hard parish he was in, and he was just getting beaten up left and right. He was just on his wit's end. So he went to his father confessor, and he kind of explained this. And so he was this wise old abbot, monk, and he kind of said, "Well, have you talked to your people?" "Yes." "Have you, instructed your people?" "Yep, I taught them." "Have you been strong with them?" "I've been strong with them." "Have you yelled at them?" "I've yelled at them." He said, "I've done everything I can think of to try to help these people. They just don't want to do it." And so the monk looked at him and said, "There's one more thing you can do." And he said, "What?" He said, "You have to get on the cross and die for them." And he's like, "That's the last thing I wanted to hear." But it's true. That's what Christ did. If we're going to live that, sometimes we have to get on the cross and die for our people. And there's a wonderful quote I didn't say here. Father Cosmos of Grigoriev, who was a priest in Zaire, missionary priest in Zaire, very famous, did incredible work, and died tragically in a car accident. And before he died, he wrote in one of his letters that the ultimate goal of the priest, the missionary, is to leave his bones among his people. That's what he did. He's still there. And that's what we're supposed to do as a priest. Sometimes we forget that. To leave our bones among the people. So, anyway, I know I got off topic, but it's an important thing. How do we do it? We live it. And then we point the direction. Say, "You're interested? Come and see." Here we are. Right? And when people come here and they see, and we act like we're supposed to act and live like we're supposed to live, and actually enjoy new people coming in, right? Everyone, you were all embraced when you came here. It's not always the same in some churches. They'll look at you like, "Who are you? Why are you here?" You embrace the people that come in, and we worship together. So that's how we move forward. That's how we witness. That's how we preach. When my first bishop in the West, Bishop Tikhon of the West, he just died a couple of months ago. He was a character. He was a character, and he was a major in the army, and he did security and all this other stuff, and so, but he always used to give me a hard time. Who's Saint Eric? Who's Saint Eric? I'm not calling you Eric. You're George. You know. But he said the most powerful sermon we can do as a Christian is this: just do the sign of the cross. That's powerful. So I miss him. He was a character. He was tall, the biggest head I've ever seen. Anyway, other questions?
How many families are here in this parish?
I honestly don't know, but I would suspect it's probably, parishes are like onions, right? Was that from Shrek, right? Onions, no, parfait. They're like onions. There's you have the core, and then you have people in various levels. I would say probably about 120 families to two. If I extend the core out, like if I talk about all the people in one way or another I have contact with or deal with in one way or another, it's well over 200 families, 250. I mean, people call me and say, oh, they need to have a panakita during the week or, whatever. So there are layers. I think I put in the annual report the official list of membership. So to be a member of the Orthodox Church, according to the statutes of the OCA, you need to be 18. You need to have confessed and communed at least once in a year, which is ridiculously low. You need to be Orthodox, obviously, and you need to provide some sort of support towards your local parish, whatever they decide it is, like whatever that may be. So the only person who really knows what the membership of the parish is me, because I know who I confess, who I commune, who I, all those sort of things. But I would say we probably, adult members, about 120, 130 adults. Children, it varies. Again, we probably have 25 children, but you certainly don't see them all in church. And then I probably deal with another 100 families besides that, outside of that, in one way or another. So, do you think I sit around all day, play video games? I'm home. I do sometimes. No, but I'm all over the place. It's part of my job. I think the right way to look at it is everyone that I can come in contact is potentially one of my parishioners. In just one way or another. When I had my dog and I'd walk the dog, I knew all the neighbors. We talk about all sorts of different things. It's nice.
How did they determine the name of St. Gregory's? How did that come about?
Yeah, well, normally a parish is named, there's a couple of ways depending on the bishop. One is the parish will vote on a series of names and send it to the bishop, and he'll pick one of them. Or the bishop may just turn around and say, well, you're going to be Saint so-and-so, or whatever. This, because it really was part of an extension from St. Vladimir Seminary down the road, the chapel at St. Vladimir's is the three hierarchs, which is Basil the Great, Gregory the Theologian, and John Chrysostom. So this was named Gregory the Theologian after one of the three hierarchs. At least that's what I understand. Which means one mission I'm going to start is going to be St. John Chrysostom, and another one's going to be St. Basil, so I can have the three hierarchs of this region. But so you have to ask Serge how they came up with that. He'll know, because he was part of that, how they voted on it. When I had my other parishes, when we did Bozeman, we had a vote, and we sent it to the bishop, and the bishop approved. He became very much like everybody wanted to call it St. Nicholas, St. Peter and Paul, Holy Trinity. So the bishop, and our bishop is kind of like this. Like, if the name already exists in the diocese, find another saint or another name so we can kind of diversify. Like, you probably noticed in the diocese, New York, New Jersey, there's probably about 10 St. Peters and Paul. and about 10 St. Nicholases. It was like one of those popular names. Like the Greeks, St. Constantine Helen. Serbs, St. Solomon. The Arabs, St. Elijah or St. George. I mean, get a little bit more creative. We have more of those things. My church in Montana was the only church in the world at that point named after St. Nikolai Zhicek. So that was kind of cool. Other questions? All right. Well, everyone have a wonderful evening. Next week, we'll talk about salvation. The last class will be on salvation. I'll give you a hint. It's not what you think. It never is. Let's pray. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, amen. Christ is risen from the dead, trampling down death by death, and upon his tombs, the skull of life. Christ is risen. Indeed, he is risen.